Hello everyone and good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our Ranorex 7.0 webinar. My name is Mario Verkener and I'm responsible for technical documentation here at Ranorex in Graz. I'm joined here today by two of my colleagues. We have Christoph Opresnik, product owner at Ranorex. He'll be leading you through the main part of the webinar. We also have Hubert Kasparitz. He's our senior sales engineer and he'll be the one answering your questions during the webinar. We're all very excited to show you all the great new features that Ranorex 7.0 has in store for you. But before we get started, just a few words on the webinar itself. As always, we'll be recording the webinar and it'll be available for you to view on demand in a few days. As for questions, if there's anything you want to ask, feel free to drop us a message in the GoToWebinar question panel. As I've already mentioned, Hubert Kasparitz will have his eyes on the panel during the webinar and try to help as many of you as possible. We'll pick out a few of the more frequent questions and Christoph will answer those at the end of the webinar. Now, of course, there are a lot of you here today and we're very glad about that, but that also means that some of the questions might not be answered during our session here. Don't worry though, we're collecting all the questions and we'll answer any that are left in a separate blog post. All right, with that, we're ready to get started and I'll hand right over to Christoph.
Thank you very much, Mario. Good morning, everybody. My name is Christoph Opresnik. I'm a product owner here over at Ranorex at the product management team in Graz. And I'm totally thrilled to show you what we have got in stock for you in Ranorex 7, which we're going to release very soon. And before we get started, I would like to raise your attention to our Ranorex user voice. In case you didn't know it yet, our user voice page has already more than 100 different ideas from all of our users all over the world. And if you're interested in order to make our product more interesting, and if you're having some wishes while using the product, please feel free to keep your ideas coming. Just head over to ranorex.uservoice.com and we're happy to look at each and every one of your ideas. But now let's go on to the interesting bits of today's web session. We are going to have a first look on Ranorex 7.0 and its features. And we have introduced a lot of great new things for you today, which I'm going to show you in the following session. Mostly revolving around our top 3 new main features, which are a new and improved test suite structure and improved reporting. Also, we have a new and improved WPF plugin for WPF applications in Windows. And of course, you might have heard already about our Selenium WebDriver integration, which we're going to look at today as well. Oops, sorry. Let's get right started with the WebDriver integration, maybe. We are going to show you now something. I have a virtual machine set up here, and I would like to start the whole topic with the test suite structure that we have made. When you look at Ranorex Studio 6, which I'm going to open up here in my virtual machine, and also all previous versions of Ranorex, and you're going to look at a very standard way of how we are creating test cases or how we have been creating test suites in the past. You can see that we have like that standard thing that we have like a few of our test cases nested. For example, here we have a data binding on an iterator in this test case. That is like, when we look at this, I think every one of you knows that trick who has been using Ranorex before, that if you want to iterate or loop a test case more than once, you're just creating like a dummy data source, which you're then going to bind on this, and then you're going to nest your actual test cases under this. And also we have here another test case with another few other child test cases and everything. So this looks quite familiar, as I said, to everyone who has been using Ranorex before. What is the case here. When we look at this here, we have here a recording that creates maybe an error or maybe not. There is a user code function behind that, and then we have some other recordings in those test cases. And when I run this whole test suite, it just starts through and it does exactly what it is supposed to do. The first parent test case here is being executed like 5 times with the child test cases below it as well. And then we also have like the other test case with an actual data binding of 3 rows. And then we get our report. As I said, maybe something fails, maybe not, so we can see what has been failing and what not. So we have been thinking a lot actually how to improve all this, because when you think about application lifecycle management tools, they are maybe or maybe also not understanding how this specific way of our test case structure is being implemented. And we wanted to make sure that we are more open when it comes to system interactions, and wanted to provide a new way of reporting that you can like integrate with JUnit compatible reports, for example. So let me just quickly head over to our new Ranorex Studio to show you the difference now. So when I start Ranorex Studio 7, and as you can see, we have created a new start page as well. And I open the same test solution as I did before already. Then, like always in major releases of Ranorex, we're going to upgrade that solution for you. And what you can see then is that after a certain after this process has been completed, you get that new upgrade report here where it says, where it introduces you into our new concept of so-called smart folders, and also tells you about the improved test suite structure in general, and also about the enhanced compatibility features we have with that. So if we close this now and look at our test case, you see that this is quite a bit different than it used to be before, because right now when I just quickly open this up as a comparison, instead of having like 6 test cases here, we only have 2 test cases left. And instead of test cases, we have that new smart folder structure. A smart folder is, generally speaking, replacing the old folders, but it has the ability for data bindings, as you can see down here. And it also does not count anymore as a report, as a test case in the report. So what we have done here is introduce a new structure where you can have like a better overview what is actually a test case and what is actually not. So in this case, for example, earlier I created this parent test case in order to iterate through those child test cases. So I can go here and right click and select convert to test case, and now I have converted those 2 smart folders into test cases which are going to count actually, and my original test case is now a smart folder because this is actually only for the iteration. And by saying this, there is no need for creating fake data sources anymore, so I can like remove this. And when you look here at the properties panel, there's a new property called iteration count, and I can directly enter the number of iterations I want to have this folder. So you can see now in the test suite that we have like 5 iterations for this test case without the need of any fake data sources. This also could be applied on test cases. And we are also automatically converting like smart folders into test cases if you move them. So for the general rule, there is always a test case on the top level, more or less, or you can have a smart folder on the top level and a test case below it, but there is no nesting of test cases supported anymore. So this means if I take this now back and put it under this one, we are actually just converting this into a smart folder for you again. So we are making sure that the whole structure that you are having in your test suite represents test cases and smart folders in a way that they are logically appealing together. So let me just move this out and run that whole test suite. Now when we're executing this, I will show you the console output here. Again, actually not much has changed to before except that I have added that iteration node now. What you can see here now is that we have a new report as well, and that new report actually only counts the test cases. And we have here that error behavior that we are skipping if something is failing. So here we can see that one of our iteration has failed, so the other two have not been executed. And in our smart folder, which is also iterating 5 times, we have like 50% of failing. And back down here where we have the data binding, actually we have that data binding on a smart folder, which is doing then our data binding as it's supposed to be. So what you can see in this whole structure is not only that we are like creating a new structure that is more easy to read, we are also providing you a new report that is more easy to read, and we have a new kind of object, which is the smart folder, which makes structuring your test case so much easier. And with this addition, we are quite happy to provide you now the opportunity that you can like go into the properties of your test suite, and under report settings you can create a JUnit compatible copy of the report. So when you check this and run it again, just waiting until this finishes, as you can see here. We can then open our solution folder in the Explorer. And here Ranorex created for us a JUnit XML file. So when we open this one, we can now present you with a JUnit compatible XML which you can directly import into your application lifecycle management tools. Of course, we also have a command line parameter. So if you're using CI environments, you can also pass this to your test executable in order to get a JUnit compatible XML file generated as a parameter. What I want to say here is maybe because you're used to different counting here when you have been using Ranorex before, there's now that thing that since we have that test case and smart folder differentiation, we are only counting test cases as such anymore. So if you're switching from a previous version to Ranorex 7, then you're challenged to like think about the structure of your test suite in order to see what is counted or what not. Generally, everything should work as before. Okay, so far this is what we have for the new test suite in stock. I will head over now to our next feature, which should be the improved WPF controls. Just closing the windows I don't need.
Let me just hook in right here, Christoph, just to recap for our viewers. So the new test suite structure simplifies test suite organization and iterations, right? And it also, and thanks to this simplification of the organization, the reports are now more logical and easier to read. We've also increased compatibility with lifecycle tool management tools and continuous integration tools. Okay, Christoph, back to you.
Thanks for running this up, Mario. Okay, so I'm back here on my virtual machine, as you can see, and what we have here is a WPF control sample application of extended data grid. It's an open source program or an open source library for data grids, and I have opened here Ranorex Spine version 6, and I've tracked into a single cell here of that table, which is Bungie. I can do that again here. And as you can see, we have a rather deep tree because WPF is a framework which is very powerful. You know, it gives you a lot of opportunities that you can create your own applications with a lot of visual power. That visual power comes at a great cost, that elements get a lot of lot more complex than they used before. So when you have been using Ranorex in previous versions, like here in 6.2.1, you can see that we are able to track into those elements with our automation, but in order to do so, we have to like activate to show all tree and do a lot of configuration stuff in order to actually find the element that we really want to automate. This results in rather complex Ranorex paths, as you can see up here, which means also a lot of complex maintenance. So we were sitting down with our developers and we're discussing, okay, what can we do in order to ease up that handling? Because actually when automating in tests, you don't want to program and you don't want to know the exact visual structure of your application, but you want to get your elements. So in Ranorex 7, we created a new improved WPF plugin. This one tries to remove all the clutter that is actually not interesting to your application or to you, and instead just focuses on the actual automatable controls and their components. I'm just opening here the same application as we had before in the on my local machine now, where I have Ranorex 7 running. And let me just open Spy here now for a second. This is our Ranorex Spy in Ranorex 7. It's fairly familiar if you have been using Ranorex before. And if I track now into that element Bungie here, you can see that our new and improved WPF element creates a much leaner and much more logical structure, which is much more useful for automation. Because here we have removed all the non-interesting, let's call it like that, like all the decorator elements and all the elements that are providing not enough information or not valid information because they're actually not controls or control elements, and are really focusing only on those things that are important to the application and its automation. We have created this all without the need of any complicated configuration. So if you look in Ranorex 7 into the WPF settings, there are only 3 things left. We have that WPF improved only option. We have still the show all elements tree in case you need it for any debug reasons, and we have the blacklist for processes you do not want to automate. But this is actually everything we need in order to provide you with a very sleek and very nice tree. So of course we have been thinking also about people using WPF in the past, and we have been like thinking, how can we provide the compatibility between those two different versions of the WPF plugin? Because actually the Ranorex paths generated by those two plugins are not compatible, unfortunately. You might not be able to use them side by side, but we wanted to make sure that you are benefiting from the new plugin whenever possible. So if I go back here and close that previous solution and then create a new test solution in Ranorex 7, and we just call that WebF plugin new. Here we can now see when we look into the solution settings that it has been activated for you by default. But if I close that solution now and open another solution which uses actually already WPF in the past, of course there is the upgrader again. And in this recording we have a WPF application used where we have like tracked into some objects. By opening a solution like this, Ranorex Studio will scan every single repository of your solution and check if there are any native WPF elements used in the repository. If there are any found, we are getting the settings as you need them automatically. So here you can see the legacy WPF configuration, and everything should work out of the box as it used before. So we are trying to maintain compatibility here, and at the same time we are trying to make a better and more leaner WPF experience.
Wonderful, Christoph. Thank you for that. I'm just going to recap that again. So the new WPF structure makes things a lot more simple and a lot simpler. And the way we've implemented the new plugin also means that any of your previously existing solutions will just continue to work as they worked before without you needing to make any configurations. Well, I think that's it for the WPF for now. What have you got in store for us next, Christoph?
Yeah, I think as next we are heading to a feature that most of you have been waiting for. I think in previous announcements and also in our pre-release webinar, you have been, maybe it has been come to you already that we have been working on a WebDriver integration in Ranorex 7. And this is like one of the, I think I would say this would take now the most time because there is a lot to see here, and I'm really excited to show this to you, what we did. If you have been working with Ranorex before in previous versions, you might have noticed that up here we do not have that View Devices button anymore. Instead, we have a View Endpoints button. And this, when clicking this button, brings us directly to the Endpoints panel, which is new in Ranorex 7. So what we did here is that we provided you with a single point where you can add mobile devices for Android, iOS, and Selenium WebDriver. This new endpoint panel is integrating everything that is platform related for automation, and is like merging all the required platform where you're executing your test runs in the future. And in this case, you're going to add new devices and new WebDriver endpoints in this panel. And I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm just opening my next solution, which I have prepared for today, which is our standard WordPress sample. Some of you might know that already. So this is our WordPress sample from our sample set of solutions we provide with Ranorex Studio. And what I'm going to do here now is just to add an endpoint. Before doing so, I would like to show you that I have prepared a fake Selenium structure here in my local computer. I know usually you're not working like this because WebDriver endpoints are supposed to be somewhere in your company's network. But what I have here is a Selenium server and a couple of drivers for different browsers. And I have that batch file that launches me the server. And here you can see that my Selenium server is up and running now. So what I can do here is I choose here WebDriver, and I call this just this laptop. And you can handily copy that example URL down here. And I'm going just to connect to that WebDriver here. So I can test the connection, and you can see we are connected, and I add the endpoint. So here you can see now that in our endpoints path, we have my local computer, which is the local host and is the standard endpoint like it was before in previous versions of Ranorex. And we have that newly added Selenium server, and we're connected to that. I could also add an Android device, like this one, for example. And then we have also an Android device here which we are connected to. So we have all our device endpoints, and that's hence the name, in one single place. You can also view the details. You can instrument and deploy apps for mobile devices, save the Android debug bridge log, and so on. When I go into details, I can see which applications are installed on the device and ready for automation. I can launch them directly. I can automate, instrument a new app down here. So everything you should need in order to test on mobile and on WebDriver should be in one place. For this example, we are not focusing on mobile this time. We're focusing on WebDriver, of course. So I'm going to delete this device from my list again. And I'm going to introduce you to a new concept that we introduced that we're going to introduce with Ranorex 7, which is the so-called automation route. As you can see here in the first column, we have that little icon that I can click in order to switch the automation route. What does that do? It switches all the element recognition to the specific endpoint that we have selected here. Also in Studio, the whole UI is reacting and showing you that you are actually now in focus of that specific endpoint. That means if I open the SPY here, for example, you can see that over the WebDriver channel on this laptop there is nothing going on. Right now, this is why the tree is empty. If I switch back to my desktop and then switch back to the SPY, you can see the whole application structure as you have it seen before again. So this is very interesting break from previous things. So we are not having like every single device that is connected to your computer, and we are like handling WebDriver endpoints like devices appearing in the same tree under your host, but we are limiting the view of elements to the specific point of to the automation route you have been selecting. So if we are going to start a browser now, like Chrome, to a website, the Chrome browser is being launched. So here we have the success. Just refreshing that for a second. Here you can see that the Chrome browser has been launched in scope of the WebDriver. And here we have the DOM of this Chrome instance, for example. So under my WebDriver automation route, I have that one single website which I just launched on Chrome. And I can even use the element navigation back here to identify different objects within the DOM. I can also close the web document again, and then it interacts with the WebDriver, and then I refresh this here again and it's empty again. So this is a very interesting concept and a very useful concept as well, because it was needed to provide you with the overview you need actually in order to create a new to separate different run points from each other. What we are currently not supporting in Ranorex 7 is the recording on WebDriver endpoints. So if you click the record button, you get that nice little message that tells you that we can currently not do that. What you can do is, like I did before in the SPY, like identify objects within the DOM and then drag them into your repository. This is not a problem, but the recording has to be done local. And I think this is also a very important concept, because we are taking a huge step towards really platform independent web testing. We want you as a user to record your tests locally on your browser and execute them on any endpoint you would like to. Okay, why did I set this all up in originally? As some of you might know, we had a bit of troubles with Microsoft discontinued support with Edge, and I just wanted to show you today that we are finally capable, thanks to the WebDriver integration, to automate on Edge again. So I just clicked on play with my WebDriver endpoint in the backside, so we are opening the Edge browser here. Edge is being started in a user session which is apart from your own. This is why you are getting the extension warnings, because it's treated like we are a new user. And as you can see here in the background, we're just automating that web example just fine, and it works in a really good performance in my opinion. And what we are doing, I can even use my mouse, which you cannot do in classical Ranorex automation. And here you can see the console of the WebDriver server or the Selenium server in the background as it interacts with Ranorex Studio. And here we can see also the console of our test run. So those two things are being interacting with each other now. The very important concept of this behind is that now when you think of a recording in previous versions of Ranorex, where you have been selecting the browser here in this drop-down, or when you create, let me just create a new recording quickly. When we have that run mobile application thing, we have had to select a new mobile device where we want to start the application. So it was more or less limited to a certain set of devices, and if you wanted to cycle through multiple devices, you had to use data binding again. This time we're introducing a different concept, because this time all your mobile devices and Selenium WebDriver endpoints are being stored within your solution configuration or locally on a device, depending on which one you have opened, and are deployed with your test executable. So what you can do is, or what we did actually, is that we removed that information on which platform your test is actually going to run out of your test suite, and you can put that information back in via command line parameter or a different option. I'm just waiting here until my test is finished and until I get my report back. And then I'm going to show you what I meant with that. So as you can see, also similar to the way in Ranorex Remote, you can continue to work in Ranorex Studio while your WebDriver tests are running. The difference, although, is that it's running locally on your computer. So we have a different implementation of the WebDriver thing than it is in Selenium. When you're working with Selenium, you're programming your tests in Java or JavaScript or any other language of your choice, and you're actually programmatically adding those new functions or that automation functions via identification and page objects. In Ranorex you have the repository and the recording, so actually it would be handy if you like start a Chrome browser, start recording in that, and then you have your recording and then you can just replay it on the WebDriver. But we are doing things a bit differently. Since we're using our own repository for this, we're having the automation also on the machine that is executing the test. And the test is executed on the computer where you're starting it. And we're only getting the information from that specific WebDriver endpoint. So as you can see, in the meantime, my web sample has been finished, And if I'm building my solution now and show you the output path in the Explorer window, there you can see that because of previously I have been doing a bit more testing with this application. Ranorex also creates you a lot of shortcuts, and those shortcuts actually utilize our um, new command line parameter. That was the wrong program. I'm sorry, I need to go to properties. So, and that one is /endpoint, and here we can, just like it is written in back here in your configuration. So actually this laptop, this is the one I have been creating. So you can select your endpoint via command line parameter with /endpoint and the name of the specific endpoint you have been added. So in case you wanted to parallel execute on different browsers, you just create a couple of WebDriver endpoints, then select a couple of those shortcuts and hit the enter key, and it will launch 3 Ranorex tests and execute them for you on the specific WebDriver endpoints. This can also, again, like with the report before, used for continuous integration systems where you can select the next available endpoint. What else can I tell you about that? Right, if you are having already created Selenium tests in Java, for example, we have created a new, we are going to release a new blog post very soon where we are going to introduce you of how to execute those tests outside of Ranorex, then import the results into our report. So you have your previous Java tests in one report, and then even start the Ranorex test after that. So you can like create a seamless transition from your previous way of working, like programming test suites, into the new way of working where you have actually no need to code, let's say it like that. I think we are one of the few vendors of software who are actually enabling you to create Selenium WebDriver tests without the need of having to program a single line of code. And I think this is a really cool achievement that we did here, and we are very proud of our developers for creating this. As for supported platforms, we are not yet on mobile devices. So WebDriver on mobile does not work yet. We are working hard on realizing this. But for the first time, you can utilize Ranorex to automate not only Windows-based PCs, but also macOS with Safari and Chrome and Firefox, and Linux with Chrome and Firefox as well. As I said, the mobile support for WebDriver is coming soon. We are working on that. And as for now, we are expanding and trying to offer you really nice and sleek out of inside browser experiences. Now you might ask if there is still the old way of automating things in here. So if I'm like switching back to my laptop, so to my local host, and not using WebDriver anymore, and I go back to my test suite, and as you know, after the anniversary update, we do not support Edge anymore via standard automation. So I'm just selecting Chrome and I'm starting this, then everything works as it did before. With the Ranorex plugin system in the browsers, and we're using the real browser and mouse automation, which blocks your keyboard and your mouse again. Why did we leave that in here? There are some reasons why you would want this. For example, if you might want to automate outside of the browsers, like loading up files with a file dialog, you can use the previously introduced plugins in order to create a better experience and have to write only one test. Also, if you want to test on mobile, as I said already, mobile is not yet supported. And of course, there are some things that we can do a bit better with our Ranorex plugins than the WebDriver can do, because WebDriver does not support all actions that we actually support out of the box, like drag and drop and so on. There it makes sense to totally revert back to the standard, or let's say previous versions of Ranorex automations.
All right, that sounds great, Christoph. Thank you for that wonderful demonstration. Just to summarize, so endpoints endpoints allow you to test an external application or a system or a service as if it were on your computer. So and the endpoint pad is your central place for adding and managing those endpoints, and it allows you to, as I said, execute tests on your machine. It allows you to execute external AUTs as if they were on your machine, and that enables compatibility with operating systems and browsers that are not supported by Ranorex Studio by default. And what's also great about this new implementation is that you can now use Selenium WebDriver integration and Selenium web tests without having to program a single, without having to write a single line of code. Okay, I think that's it for the main part of the presentation. We're now going to come to the question and answer session. I think we've prepared a couple of questions already. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. I can see a lot of questions here. I will try to answer the most of them. And as Mario said already in the introduction, for all the other questions that we are not able to cover in this time frame, we are going to have a separate blog post where we can make sure to answer all of your questions. So let me come to the first question that came up here. What is the difference between test case and smart folder, besides that only test cases count in the report? Yeah, that's actually true. A smart folder replaces the current the folder which we had in previous versions, but it makes it so much more powerful, because now you can use a folder for data binding and for iterations, and it helps you to structure your test suite in a way without affecting your test cases. So with Ranorex 7, your test case is going to count as a test case, and everything else for structuring it, for repeating it, for covering it into different layers is going to be done via the smart folder. And since in previous versions of Ranorex the folder was just not powerful enough to achieve all this, we decided to make it smart, hence the name, and it supports now the iterator, and it supports also the data binding. Next question would be, Ranorex 7 simplifies WPF. In order to simplify current WPF element, we need to capture back the element. I suppose this question targets the compatibility between those two. You actually do not have to recreate everything from scratch. So because we created that compatibility layer, which we call legacy mode, and that legacy mode is always active when we detect any WPF elements in your repositories. So with other saying it differently, whenever you open a solution from previous Ranorex versions, even if you have a special configuration to your previous Ranorex version WPF plugin, we are making sure that it works just as it did before. But if you're creating something new, like a new Ranorex solution, then we want to make sure that you get the best experience out of it, and that's why you get activated the Improve WPF plugin. You can also switch between those two via user code. So if you're an advanced user, you can do that, but we are actually wanting you to keep your existing and running tests as they are and create new ones with the new plugin. Then by using the WPF enhanced or improved WPF, is Ranorex 7 able to detect WPF only repo items? Yes, we are detecting the WPF only repo items by scanning your repository and activate the previous version of the plugin for you automatically. Okay, the next question is about Selenium server. Do you deliver the Selenium server with Ranorex? Thanks for the input. I also think it would be great if we would integrate it, but right now we're targeting, or we are assuming that you have an existing Selenium infrastructure in your company somewhere. And we are currently not deliver it with Ranorex, so you have to set it up yourself, but we have described in your user guide a quick how-to, how this works. On seleniumhq.org, it's also very well documented, but stay tuned for future versions and maybe also refer to the user voice in order to make this happen. Okay, operating system supporting Ranorex tests. Yes, for traditional desktop applications, we support PCs with Windows. Ranorex 7 shows you a technology limitation warning when you are automating on Windows XP, because Windows XP is going to be discontinued very soon by Microsoft, but it still works on Windows XP till the latest version of Windows 10. For web testing, we support Windows, Mac, and Linux using WebDriver. And for mobile, we support iOS and Android up to the latest versions. Then the next question is very interesting. It's about using Browser Stack as an endpoint. Yes, you can basically use Selenium grids as endpoints. You can add them, and you can also, like in Ranorex Studio, add additional capabilities in order to log in there. But it was not on our focus yet. So basically, you can do everything with grids in order to automate via them as endpoints, but as it wasn't on our focus yet, it might be a bit complicated to achieve that. Okay, then we have, what can I say? Version 7 looks and performs very good, much better than older versions, in my humble opinion. Thank you very much. We're super happy to hear that. And of course, we're always trying to make it even more sleeker. Okay. Then, if there is an option to run existing tests on Safari under macOS with Selenium driver, or tests should be rewriting, usually you can execute your existing web tests after adding your Mac as an endpoint directly using the WebDriver endpoint there. Just watch out for maybe some actions that you have in there that might be not supported. For example, Selenium does not support a maximized browser window, and you will get a warning in your report that maximized browser windows are not supported, and in that case we'll have to turn that off again. We know that there are some developers like on Stack Overflow who are utilizing JavaScript in order to resize a window so that it appears maximized, but we are more thinking that we are only supporting what WebDriver also supports, and that's why we talk back to you through the report then and tell you that there might be some things that in your recording that you should look at. Okay, then next question is, can Ranorex 7 support test execution in parallel on multiple virtual machines? We need to start test run on different machines with different test cases. The simple answer is yes, we do support that. We have on the one hand our Ranorex remote feature, which we have introduced with Ranorex 6, where you can deploy your tests to remote agents and let them execute them there. Also, when using WebDriver, you can even start multiple processes in parallel in order to automate that. So we have a wide range of parallel execution options for you available. Is it possible to make tests with the new Selenium integration that doesn't need an active monitor on the testing machine anymore? Yes, that's possible. Can we target a Selenium grid host? Is this setup supported? As I said before, yes, is basically possible to add a Selenium grid and execute tests on that grid. We send then, in the most simple setup, we add the grid to the, we can have a look at this later maybe. I don't know about the time, maybe not. You can just add a simple grid to your solution and tell the grid to execute your web test on the specified browser that you want to automate with, and it will automate it. Okay, then is it possible to run a test case simultaneously, for example 20 times, to do a load test on a system? Technically, yes, it's possible, but we also, or I would like also to hint on to our NeoLoad integration, which is a specialized tool for load testing, and you can head over to our homepage and get the necessary tools in order to automate your Ranorex test with NeoLoad. As to the question which version of Selenium is supported, we have tested Ranorex 7 on the latest versions of Selenium and the respective drivers. So this should be okay. Also, as you could have maybe seen in my folder before, we have been doing this on the 3.3 Selenium server, and 3.1 Selenium server should work both out of the box. But of course, there is that community-driven spirit behind all of that, and people are always continuing to improve their plugins. So it's a vast number of numbers available. Okay, so we have like 2 questions left. The last before the last is also on Selenium WebDriver integration. What's the difference on running tests in endpoints and local browser? When you are running a test in your local browser, then we are utilizing the Ranorex plugins for the various browsers. That, like we have a Chrome plugin, on Internet Explorer we're using Windows native instrumentation, on Firefox we have a separate plugin in order to automate the browser and its DOM. When you're using WebDriver, we are using the WebDriver JSON over wire protocol to get the information about the DOM and send back to the Selenium server the actions that we would like to have executed on that DOM. So this is what we are going to do. So this is plugin free. When you're using WebDriver, this is based on a standard or a quasi-standard, because WebDriver is in the candidate recommendation with W3C, and the local automation is based on your local computer and the plugins that you have installed on your browser. Both have their advantages and disadvantages, and we are supporting both now for the first time. Okay, before I come to the last question of this session, which is when and how can we download the version 7? What do you say, Mario? Should we tell them?
I think, yeah, it's time to tell them, Christoph. Would you like to have the honor, or should I? I think I'll give you the honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, everybody, in case you're curious to try out Ranorex 7 for yourself, please head over now to our homepage, because you can download it from now. We have officially released Ranorex 7, and if you're having installed Ranorex already on your computer, let me show that here to you. In Ranorex Studio 6 and previous versions, on the start page, you have that nifty little download button down there where you can download Ranorex 7 instantly. For everyone else who hasn't been using Ranorex 7 before, please head over to our website ranorex.com and register for a trial version. I can guarantee you it's worth it.
Definitely. Well, I think that concludes the webinar. We really enjoyed showing you all the new features that Ranorex 7.0 has in store for you, and we hope you like it as well and head right over to our webpage or and download it or upgrade from your existing installation. Thank you again to all of you for joining us today, for asking so many great questions, and we'll see you again when it's time for the next webinar. Thank you.
Also, thank you from my side. I wish you a nice day and happy testing with Ranorex 7. See you in the future webinar.